Welcome to the Foster Friendly Podcast, where we come together to make a difference in the lives of children in foster care and the families who care for them. Foster Friendly communities are part of a nationwide movement by America's Kids Belong that helps people from all walks of life take action and help kids and families thrive. You'll hear from former foster youth, foster and adoptive parents, social workers, faith and business leaders, and other experts on how to engage in meaningful ways. Our hosts Brian, Travis, and Courtney explore inspiring stories of everyday people making a difference in foster care where they live and work.
All right. Hello, listening audience. I know you might be listening to this podcast in the middle of the summer, but today in our recording, all of America is frozen. I'm currently at minus 15 here in Colorado. Travis, how are things out where you are?
I'm in South Carolina. It's about 15, so that tells you about everything.
Yeah, that's bad for South Carolina. And then our guest today, Michael Weitzman. Michael, tell us where you're from and give us a little temperature update.
Yeah, I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Yesterday it was down to 12 degrees. I don't know what it's at. Right now it says 13 degrees. So we're at up 13.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Balmy. Yes, great. I love
That's
it.
summer for you though.
Yes, that's right. That's t-shirts and shorts weather right there.
There we go.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited, Michael, to be connecting with you. And for our audience listening out there, our guest, Michael Weitzman, grew up in foster care, and we love hearing from foster care alumni. And he's going to share his journey and insights and experiences with us today. Michael, you and I, we first met a year ago out in Washington, D.C. Yeah, at the National
Prayer Breakfast. Yeah.
So curious, why were you there?
It's actually a random, story because my allegiance is to Oklahoma. I got invited by a random group out of Illinois. A friend of mine who serves at a ministry called Lifeline for Orphans has gone a few times, and some of his connections asked if he had anybody that wanted to go. And so he called me and said, "Hey, do you want to come join us?" And so anyways, it was right before I ended up moving to Arkansas. So I felt like I was torn between Okies and Arkansans when I was there. But every time people would ask like who I was with, I had to say like this random group from Illinois.
Oh man. So yeah, you were representing three. You were the Fighting Illini.
Yeah, there we go.
the Razorbacks and the Sooners.
Yeah.
Michael Weitzman grew up in foster care system of Southern California. Tragically, he experienced a failed adoption. I hate that. And was put back into foster care. Eventually leaving foster home number 12 at 17 years old to move to Tulsa, Oklahoma and begin a new life for himself. Michael was the first recipient awarded the Fostering the Future Scholarship from First Lady Melania Trump. He also had the opportunity to speak to the White House with the Biden administration and executives from the Department of Health and Human Services. Michael is a self-taught software engineer who has run a successful technical consulting company for the last 7 years. Michael deeply desires to influence the spaces of child welfare, human services, and public services. He has also mentored countless teenagers. Well, Michael, that is an impressive bio because of the obstacles you've overcome. Not just where you have arrived, but what you had to go through to get there. That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Welcome to the podcast, Michael. Tell us anything else about yourself, and what are you most excited about in this new year?
Yeah, well, 2025, I mean, it's kind of a big number, right? Like, the intervals of 5, the year that ended 5 and 0, I feel like we build up to be monumental to begin with. I don't know that I have anything ultra exciting that I'm looking to, or any goal. I know that a lot of people will set a word of the year for themselves or New Year's resolutions. This is one of the first years I haven't really done anything like that. I think the only thing I want to do is to look more like Jesus when the year ends than when the year started. And so just trying to figure out how to build intentional rhythms to accommodate that.
Grow out your beard a little bit more. I think that will help.
that will do it. Yeah. Most people don't know about me is most people can tell that like, oh, he doesn't look like 100% white, but they typically don't guess that I'm actually half Middle Eastern. So I'm half Armenian. And so
Oh,
so
okay.
Jesus and I probably, and I'm actually 23% Jewish too. So I might have some of the heritage there to pull it out.
All right, man,
All
you're
right.
far, you're already far along. Yeah,
There
you're.
we go.
It didn't really occur to me, but you are like you look at you and you're like, huh. I don't know where you're from.
Yeah,
Can't place
I
it.
get Hispanic so often
Yeah,
because this is America, but yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, in Southern California, that fits too.
So
So
yeah,
Exactly, yeah.
so becoming more like Jesus this year. So, all right.
Exactly.
So
There we go. There we
well,
go. I'm
I'll
gonna
tell you
bounce
what.
between Jesus and Yeshua.
Well, after hearing your bio, if 2025 is you just resting, I think you're still ahead of me.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Thanks, Travis.
So, yeah, love to hear as we now journey more into your story. So, just if you could just take us into more about your foster care journey, kind of what it was like to be removed from your home, and then just a snapshot of what it was like being in care.
Yeah. Well, what led me to care was I was born to a single mom who was 18, and she was living in foster home number 18 or 20, 22, somewhere in that range. So she had experienced way more than I had. And I'm now the oldest of 10 kids that she's had. But and I know a little bit later we'll talk about siblings, but
Wow.
I'm her oldest. After she had me, she had her next. And so when I was 15 months old and the one below me was 3 months old, he passed away suddenly of something
Mm.
called SIDS, which is sudden infant death syndrome, where you
Hmm.
essentially just pass away in your sleep.
Hmm.
And when the police had come to check in on my well-being, they found me sitting on the kitchen floor, home alone for a number of days, with a knife in my hands. And again, this is at 15 months old. And so
Mm.
that was the day that I was taken into custody and became a foster kid. And over
Mm.
the next 15 months, by 2.5 years old, I'd been in 6 different placements.
Jeez.
Hmm.
And arrive at 2.5 years old at home number 6 with my biological grandfather. And so it's my mom's dad. He's 6'8", over 300 pounds, just a monstrosity of a human being.
Mm.
And uh, daily, there was lots of physical and sexual abuse, lots of neglect. Some of my earliest memories are begging for food at gas stations and fast food restaurants just to survive. Would run away often, so I knew cops on a first name basis in the area. And I lived in that environment for a total of 2.5 years, so until I was 5. And one thing sticks out to me, even now, that I was at daycare one day and I saw somebody, one of the other kids who was there, he was a little bit older though. He was reading a book and I asked him what it was, and he told me it was the Bible. And I asked him what it was about, and he told me just, like whatever you would tell a little kid, to help him figure out what the Bible is. And he taught me how to read John 3:16.
Hmm.
And I remember, at the end of Psalms chapter 23, David writes and he says, "Surely your goodness and mercy have followed me all the days of my life." And as I envisioned this season of little Michael being 3 years old, literally wandering the streets looking for ways to feed themselves, um, I just think, man, and here's a perfect example of God's goodness and mercy following me from the first to the last day of my life, as I'm sure it's going to continue. And so
Hmm.
grateful for that. And so that birthed in me at a very young age an image of Jesus, awareness of Jesus. And so, anyways, at 5 years old, I was mysteriously taken away suddenly from that foster home where I was with my grandfather and ended up going to home number 7. And I was there for 2 weeks, and then went to home number 8. And home number 8 was really miraculous. A few months in, it was a foster adopt situation, so they fostered to adopt me. And a couple months in, they had adopted me already. It went really quick. It was my biological
Hmm.
great aunt and uncle. So the family tree is a little unique, but the biological grandfather I was living with, where some of the abuse and neglect took place, is brothers with the guy who's now adopting me, with the dad who's adopting me. And so
Hmm.
it's a unique, family tree. But they were a strong Christian family. They had 2 of their own bio kids, and they had 3 others that they had adopted, 2 from Korea and 1 from Russia. And then they got me from the foster system, and I was the youngest of six, and lived there. And I was introduced to Jesus at a really young age. I participated in this ministry or program called Awana, which is like a club for younger kids to memorize scripture at a high clip, and ended up realizing that I had this innate gift to memorize scripture and just absorb the word of God. And obviously, that doesn't come from me at all, but it was something that the Lord planted inside. And so ended up becoming like the poster child of the West Coast as far as Awana goes, and did that. And so the word of God was planted in my heart at a really young age. And while this adoptive home fulfilled many needs spiritually, physically, I wasn't being abused per se. It missed what would be characterized as a good home, which is the emotional attachment that any kid needs with his family. And part of that is because of how I had grown up and the number of attachments I'd already lost by 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But another part is I don't think they were necessarily aware of what it meant to take in a child with severe trauma. It's one thing to adopt an infant at 2 or 3 months old. Not that that's no trauma, but it's severely less, you know? Um, so I think they were wholly unprepared. And then, frankly, we are all sinners. We're all imperfect. We all have our own stories and our pasts. And so the older I get, the more I can kind of see how some of their past had influenced some of the lack of health in that home. And that bled into the way that they raised me. And I would say the two things that I would characterize it as most was number one, there was this kind of view that raising children was formulaic and that you would raise every kid the same, which I believe scripturally is not necessarily accurate. I think each kid is designed uniquely. Every one of us has a unique design made by God. And so they would kind of pride themselves on having figured out the formula to raising kids. And so you just raise them the same way, no matter what their story is or what their past is. And then I think the second thing was the word of God was really weaponized in that home against us as the kids. And again, I don't think it was an intentional thing. It's hard when these really hurtful things happen. There's a temptation to just like call the intention evil and the motivation evil. But I actually believe that there was really good intent. It was just misplaced and misguided, I believed, and misinformed. And so, but my punishment frequently was writing books of the Bible at a time. And so one winter break, I had to write the book of Proverbs 5 times. So I remember on Christmas Day not celebrating with the family, but instead being trapped in my room and writing books of the Bible. One summer break, wrote the book of Psalms 10 times. Dude, Psalms is so long. Like, I would not, that like FBI needs to bring that in as a form of torture. Just write Psalms 119 10
Yeah, I
times.
was gonna say.
So, anyways, that was difficult. And I think lastly, I lived in a home where I was rarely affirmed, and it felt like the only time I was affirmed or deemed as lovable was when I made my adoptive parents look good. So when the church would have me stand on the stage and recite chapters of the Bible, that gets them a lot of merit, and it gets them a lot of respect and recognition. And so they loved me on those days, and it felt like they loved me more on those days.
Mm,
Um, so I definitely, even now, wrestle with this view of God as a father and what really is unconditional love, a
mhm,
love that isn't based on what I do and how I perform and how well I steward what I've been given, but a love that's simply based on me existing because he says that's true. And it's
mm,
one thing to have the knowledge and awareness of these truths. That's another thing to be able to identify and experience that day in and day out. And I would say I still wrestle with that. And I would say, frankly, I'm pretty far from experiencing Jesus as a father. Um, but that's part of my journey, and it's part of what he'll walk with me through moving forward. But at 15 years old, my adoptive parents sat me down, and we had a conversation where they kind of shared with me that because of my past being abused and being hurt and experiencing trauma, statistics show that people who experience that are more likely, not guaranteed, but just more likely to do those things to others. And they were very concerned for the safety of their grandkids, people at church, everywhere around, really. And so I was told that they felt like they had to protect the world from me. And I remember, like, the last decade, I've been taught that Jesus can redeem anyone's story. He can redeem any part of your or my story. And it felt like this was the one thing that apparently he couldn't redeem. This was the one thing that Jesus couldn't, you know, take over and make something beautiful out of. And the hard part of that was I felt ultimately powerless. I was powerless at 2.5 to 5 years old, and I was powerless as a child, navigating and circumventing the foster system and going from home to home. But now I'm powerless as to how people view me because of it. And it doesn't matter what you do and how you act or how much you try to love people, like you're still perceived in a certain way. And so that was really difficult. It felt like I had no agency to impact the way people viewed me.
Mm.
And so a week or two later, it was a short period of time, I ended up being taken away. They had me leave the home, and I went into a series of other homes after that. And so from 15 to 17, navigated four more homes. Two were residential facilities, and then two were group homes. Um, and at 15 and a half, 16, no, 16, at 16, at that first group home, so now home number 11, I was introduced to like a mentor through that organization. And y'all probably know the organization, Olive Crest.
Mm-hmm.
And so Olive Crest was where those last two homes were. I lived in Southern California area, Bellflower and Orange County areas. And so Olive Crest had a mentorship program. And so I was introduced to a mentor. His name was Chris, and his dad owned a company in Tulsa, but he was living here in California working remote for his dad. And Chris would just begin to take me to church with his family every other weekend. And it was just the one time of the week, like being with him, being out of the home, that I would feel normal, that I would not feel like I was some outcast from society, but that I was just like a normal person. And and so anyways, that was really helpful. And I remember I had done really everything I could do to help cater to a good outcome for my life when I turned 18. The stats are no secret to y'all that, 81% of kids that age out of foster care within a year are dead, homeless, addicted, or incarcerated. And that by the time you're 23, over half of males that age out of foster care have spent time in prison. And that 75% of girls by the time they're 21 have become single mothers or are victims of trafficking. Like, these are very sobering statistics. And I was hell bent on not being one of them.
Mm.
And at the time, it felt like I actually could control much of my destiny and impact that. And so I had graduated high school at 16 years old, and I was working often and really trying to work as much as I could to just figure out the next step. And it was just very apparent to me that no matter what I did, it would not be enough. And I wish at 17 that I would have clued into that message a little bit more, or had the wisdom to clue into that message a little bit more. Because isn't that true of you and I today? That, like, no matter what we do, like, it really is just a small influence on our life in the grand scheme of things, that God ultimately can choose how much our little efforts can impact our life. And so ultimately at 17, me working and me having graduated early and me doing my best to be impressive was just not enough. And I had heard a preacher at one time say that you don't have a problem unless you need God to solve it. And this felt like my first problem. Like,
Mm.
it was always easy to get the job that I wanted. I was really good at interacting with people. And yet I couldn't solve this. I couldn't do it on my own. And I remember having breakfast with Chris, my mentor. And I just said, "Hey, Chris, I'm terrified of what happens when I turn 18." And I said, "I know that God can do whatever he wants with my story, and I'm happy for him to. But right now, it doesn't seem like he's doing much." And I was about 6 months from my 18th birthday. And he said, "Well, if you want, my dad owns this company in Tulsa. I'm sure we could set you up with a job, help you figure out a place to live, then you could start a new life for yourself." And so, of course, I said yes as my only option. And 6 days later, his dad had said yes and had bought my one-way ticket to Tulsa. And so at 17 years old, I moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma, to start a new life. And God really intervened in a number of ways. And just, it was so amazing to see God's faithfulness on full display, and to still be seeing his faithfulness on full display. But I arrived in Oklahoma, started working for this guy, and did that for about a year. And then I had an opportunity to go live overseas as a missionary. So I spent 6 months in Ecuador, with this ministry serving kids that were living on the streets and enslaved by the mafia. and then serving in a variety of other capacities. And that birthed in me this realization that God could actually use the pain that I went through, and God could actually use the awareness, the unique awareness that I have that many other people will not. People that want to serve children but have not walked the road that I have, God can use that to actually connect and relate to an immense amount of people. And it was the first time that I had this thought that God was going to do that, that He had actually designed me for that purpose. And so at 19, I purposed that for the rest of my life, I wanted to do all I could to serve vulnerable children in whatever capacity that looked like. And so it's, now a decade later, it's led to me going on a number of mission trips, living overseas, mentoring and discipling hundreds of teenagers here in Tulsa, Oklahoma when I was involved in youth ministry, uh, being one of the original engineers for the Care Portal platform that you guys probably know a lot about, and so many other opportunities to really share my story and ultimately share about the goodness of God in my story, and then just advocate for other kids. And so that kind of was a little bit lengthy, but it kind of sums up a little bit of the last 28 years.
You've lived, a few lifetimes. So it seems like way more than 28. Thanks for sharing and being really, uh, vulnerable about some hard things. I've a couple questions come to mind. So two, I'll just have you take however you want to take it in. So one was, I'd like for you to unpack a little bit more of how that felt, to be sat down at 15 and say you're no longer, belong to this family. What kind of impact that made. And then you mentioned having a ton of siblings, and then as well as some adoptive siblings, and kind of like siblings to cousins and all that kind of thing. And it's something that sometimes our listeners don't consider, is not only the losses that you've had, but then you get that further loss with siblings. So those two questions,
Yeah.
and yeah, take it however you'd like.
Yeah. So just to clarify that the conversation with my parents at 15 wasn't informing me that I was leaving. I actually, at that point, thought I was staying. I just thought that like it was going to be even more miserable for the next 3 years until I was 18 and could leave. I was like, crap, now I'm trapped in this prison
Mhm.
that was shrouded on the outside in righteousness
Mm.
and holiness. But on the inside, it was just a prison that confined me. And so it was really to my surprise. I was literally woken up in the middle of the night while I was sleeping 2 weeks after that conversation to find out that I was leaving, and I was taken away at that moment. Um, I think that the way I describe it most frequently is I went from forever to forgotten in the matter of a second. When kids are
Mm.
adopted, we call it their forever home,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very much what I thought mine would be. And as much as I didn't like it most of the times, and as much as I didn't feel connected or that I even belonged, I thought it was forever. And within a second, I was forgotten about. And there's many promises of visitation. There's many promises of family therapy and working towards reunification, and that just did not actualize. And so I felt like utterly abandoned. And I'll be clear, explicitly clear, that if you would add up all of the trauma from the first 5 years of my life, which was many and extreme, it would not hold a candle to the pain of that one decision to get rid of me a decade later.
Wow.
And today I still wrestle with that, not on a daily basis. I don't often find myself in tears crying about this, but really, like, the way it's hurt me the most is in my ability to relate and connect with the Father, with Jesus. And so I think what I say often is if I were to get cancer and go to the hospital and follow a treatment program and eventually leave, I get released because I've healed and they've fixed it. they're going to give me all these pamphlets and all this information on what to expect. Like, what are the warning signs that it's coming back? When to know that you should come in? There's a treatment plan. Kids that leave foster care are not getting any of that. You're just like thrown out. And you just have to figure it out, and I had no idea at 17 and 18 years old that at 28 years old stuff would still be coming up. I would still be learning, oh my, like that's how that actually affects today. And it's not like I'm just utterly like unable to like live life now because I'm so confined by this. Although there are many people that are, it's really only by the grace of God that I'm not in that position. But it still affects me. Like it still influences the most important aspect of my life, which is my ability to relate to the Father. So that's the answer to the first part. And as far as the siblings conversation, I don't know who my biological father is. So there could be more siblings out there that I
Mm.
don't know that exist. But in my bio family, I'm the oldest of 10. Many of us have different dads. The one below me passed away, as I shared. And the one below him, we had connected when I was like 19 and he was 17. And we actually met each other in person once. And then he passed away suddenly at 17 years old. He actually had a brain aneurysm at basketball practice. And it was funny enough, or ironically enough, it was the night before he was going to hop on a plane to visit me in Tulsa for our second time to see each other. And so I get a call from his grandmother late that night that he had passed away suddenly. So there's 8 of us total that are still alive, and I've met a few of the younger ones. And then I think due to relations with, or like just weirdness from my bio mom, because she's got her own set of challenges, that those families that have adopted my other siblings have cut off ties with me as well. So I don't really have any way of knowing anything about any of my biological siblings. And so
Hmm.
in some way it's difficult because you're like, man, I want to know. And ultimately, like, I want to be able to love them and serve them and hopefully like represent Jesus in their story. And on the other token, like, I don't know them, so it's not like I'm missing something that like was taken from me. I don't have memories living with them or anything like that. Like, none of us really lived with each other, so
Hmm.
it's not this like paralyzing thing. And then the siblings in my adoptive family, when my adoptive family had me leave the home, it wasn't just my family that it felt like had abandoned me, it was everyone. And like over the past decade, yeah, like there's been a few conversations here and there, but I would say there's no relationship between myself and any of my adoptive siblings either. And each one of them at this point, it was kind of crazy. It seemed like my removal from the home was kind of the catalyst for a lot of my siblings and even extended family to kind of clue in on some of the things that they had maybe accepted that were maybe not the most healthy. Because now it seems I've heard that a number of the siblings are now wrestling in their own way with their relationship with our parents. And so
Hmm.
everyone's kind of been hurt and damaged and affected.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and so we're all just trying to figure it out. But I I vacillate in seasons between ultra hopeful that God is actually going to redeem that and He'll use me to be a part of that, and sometimes utterly hopeless,
Hmm.
that there's no way that this becomes salvaged. But whether it does or whether it doesn't, it's not really on me. And so I
Hmm.
trust God to do what God wants to do, and I'm happy to contribute to that in any way that I can.
Hmm. So just to clarify too, you're saying that of your 8 biological siblings, you have no connection or
None.
any relationship with or knowledge really of wow.
Yeah, I have no clue where they live, what age they are, like nothing.
Hmm. Was there ever part of an attempt at reaching out, or were ever any foster parents helpful in that, or
Yeah, when my brother passed away, the one that I had met when I was like 19, um, one of the adoptive moms found me on Facebook. One of the adoptive moms of one of the younger kids, the second to youngest. And so they had lived in Seattle, and she knew the adoptive mom of the 2 youngest boys. So the 3 youngest I actually got to meet a couple times. Um, and so, but since I've lost relationship with them, And I don't really understand why. It's truly a mystery to me. So I have really no clue as to like it truly like one day just they suddenly vanished and like had blocked me on Facebook and had blocked my phone number. And so I have truly not the slightest clue as to why. But that's been a little bit of a
Wow.
bummer.
Yeah, I can't even imagine that part of it. So there's so many things we could just respond to as you just kind of unpack the story and your journey and things that a couple things that stood out to me. And I just wanted to ask a question was, it seems like the research now talks about how we live in an era, this is where it's kind of the norm for a lot of kids actually that are, I want to say like 24, 25, that still have a significant presence in their home. I mean, that's in a stable, non-foster, a biological family. So when we talk about now, like all of the trauma and all of the, you know, the I guess the harm and maybe the emotionally stunting types of things, the educational problems that foster care, that experience can cause, to then be 17, 18, even in a state where 21, you're kind of staying through the system. It's like you're in no, I mean, kids just are in no way, shape, or form ready to go. And that was kind of what you said, largely. And so anyway, I was going to ask you too, how has this sort of uh, ongoing relational loss and fragmentation of, some, earthly identity with fatherhood and things like that, how has it impacted now current relationships and attaching and people in your life now as an adult?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that continues to evolve, that I continue to try to grow in. I want to pause because I think I'd be remiss to continue this interview, this connecting here, without acknowledging the countless people that, in one capacity or another, have intervened in my life and have decided to stick around and just be consistently faithful to me. And so ultimately, it's Jesus' faithfulness through the faithfulness of the people that I think has had a tremendous and the highest impact on my life. One of my favorite verses in Scripture is Hosea chapter 11:4. And God speaking to the Israelites, he says, I led you with cords of human kindness and through ties of love. And I'm just reminded that like that is how Jesus like intervenes in our lives. He does it through cords of human kindness and interaction. And so I have more people than I could probably name in the
Mm-hmm.
time we have left, but that have been a part of my life. And some of them have been a part of my life consistently and faithfully for the last 10 years now. And so, one thing that I wrestle with still, and on my healthiest of days, I do okay. And on my non healthiest of days, I don't. But one thing that I still wrestle with is I think it's twofold. I think our scars reveal some of the greatest beauty in life because without it, would the beauty actually be beautiful? And I think that I have a unique ability to appreciate relationships and the commitment of people to engage in my life because I know what it's like to not have that.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me to understand that and have that visibility and that recognition, I think is ultra powerful. And then I have to be just very aware and intentional. I can wake up and choose to see all the ways I've been wronged and all that I've missed out on and all that I don't have. Or I can choose to say, and yet, like, Jesus loved me enough. Like, his mercy and goodness still follows me, that I have people I can celebrate Christmas with, that I have people that call me to see how school's going, that I have people that want to engage with me on a weekly, daily, monthly basis. Like, it's just kindness. Like I don't deserve it. And so, and I think I want to also debunk this notion. This is probably a longer answer than you initially expected, but I want to debunk this notion that like I've done a lot to get to where I'm at. Like sure, like maybe I've made some intentional decisions, but like it would like be very simple-minded and foolish of me to believe that where I am today and the relationships I have and the opportunities I've had and my own like mental health, like the fact that I'm as whole as I am today is a result of my own efforts. My own efforts actually played the most minimal um part of that equation. and it really is, because there have been people that have put up with me in my unhealth. There have been people that have just faithfully walked with me and mentored me and counseled me and pointed me to Jesus instead of their own opinions. And so there's a multitude of people that I have to thank um, for who I am today, which is far from perfect, but someone that's still trying to become, holy and more like Christ. And so I hope that gives a clear sense of, yeah, like relationships are hard. And anytime um like it feels like a relationship could be lost, that's hard. Or saying goodbye when I move to a different state, that's really difficult, because it really just feels like you're moving again. And so there are things that I grapple with and will likely grapple with till the day I die. And I think that that's one thing that I've slowly become okay with, is just knowing that not all of this will disappear. And Jeremy Camp, actually, he's an older Christian artist, who's not, I guess, as modern anymore. But Jeremy Camp had a song like maybe 15, 20 years ago at this point, that at the moment I loved just because it sounded good, but I didn't really even count the weight of the words he was saying. But it says, "There will be a day with no more tears, no more pain, no more suffering, and where we'll see Jesus face to face." And like, I believe that it's likely that my story and the things I've experienced will impact and will leave some residue for the rest of my life. Um, does it mean I just like lay on my back and let it happen? No, like you do all you can to mitigate it while still recognizing, like, hey, scars are real, and emotional scars, I think, are worse off than physical ones often. And so, but I think there's a lot of hope as well. And so that's what I try to lean on my healthiest of days. So
Hmm.
Well, Michael, I just listening to everything you've said so far, like three things that are really coming out to me that I want to highlight. One, you just kind of ended there. What you just said is that um, people that haven't experienced those kinds of deep traumas before, that sometimes they're surprised that people don't get over them,
right.
and they do last a lifetime. And it's not something you get past; it's something you learn to carry. And with God's grace, you can do that. And so, I want our listeners to just more deeply appreciate that those wounds are something that you can forgive, but maybe you never forget it. And then the next thing that really comes out is, to me, this almost seems like the theme of this conversation, and maybe at least one of the themes of your life. What you were saying reminds me of when Jesus tells his followers that people who have given up their home or brothers and sisters or father and mother will be given 100 times as much. And even though you didn't give them up,
I didn't choose
uh,
to give it up. Yeah.
they were taken from you.
Hmm.
And Jesus said, "I'll make sure you have a family." And he's done that through the church, that he's had lots of people come around you and help you. And like you said, you know, it feels like to you maybe the biggest things that you did were making choices. And then as soon as you made that choice, it was like stepping on a moving sidewalk at a airport. You know, you took one step, and then the rest of it they kind of helped carried you along. And I think that's the third thing, is to really more to our listeners, is there's kids out there right now like Michael who you may not be related to them, they might not be living with you, but they need a friend. They need a safe, wise, trustworthy adult in their life. And so have your eyes open for that. If you see a kid who is looking for adult guidance, be willing to say, "I can be there." So, Michael, would you circle around that a little bit more about encouraging people to kind of take more of a mentoring role, even if it's not formally framed as mentoring? It's, could be framed as a friendship.
Yeah, one thing that I feel like I've observed, both in my time in care and then just being connected to the space, as we like to call it, of foster care and serving kids, is I believe that much of our at least governmental approach to serving foster kids is designed to manage children and not to care for them. Um, I get it. It makes sense. But I think that there are just large numbers of kids and kids even aging out of care that have not been cared for.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
that's like fundamental to human life, to human maturation. Like that is like that's like the rudimentary level of living. And
Mm-hmm.
without that, you're kind of destitute and bankrupt. And so I do believe that the greatest thing the church can do is not build another program, is not throw more money at this, but just choose to like engage with people.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes outside the sphere of foster care. Like actually most of the teenagers
Mhm.
that I shared that I have mentored and discipled through being involved in youth ministry, and I still have 8 guys that I would say I consistently walk with, and I've done it for the last 8 years, and I've told them that I'm committed for life. None of them grew up in foster care. I just believe that the call of the church is to engage with the people on our left and right, and to engage in the people that are just in our lives and they're in our spheres, and to invite them into ours. And I think a lot of people, I hear them talk about, well, like I need to keep my family safe, and I need to protect like the family that I have. And while I get it to an extent, I believe the church has fallen short at being the church in so many ways. And I believe that Jesus is clear about who our brother and our mother and our father really is. And it's far outside of blood and anything genetic. It's those that are in the church. And so I think there's just a call of believers to do this. Um, but I believe specifically for foster kids that the greatest way to serve them is to just say yes to being in relationship, to invite them into your space, let them like be a part of as much as they can,
Mhm.
and the part that they have to do is say yes. And as you were talking, Brian, about the second part about, yeah, like I think that the only part that I've really played is making some small decisions. It reminds me of this book that I read every year. It's one of my favorite books ever. It's called Celebration of Discipline. It's written by Richard Foster.
Mm-hmm.
And the first chapter, that like before he starts introducing the spiritual disciplines he's talking about, oh, look at that. There we
Oh,
go. I knew I
on
liked you.
cue. On cue.
So, in the first chapter, before he introduces any of the 12 spiritual disciplines, I think the chapter is called The Door to Liberation. Um, but he talks about how the spiritual disciplines of meditation and prayer and fasting and all the other ones are not in and of themselves what produce righteousness in us. They are the means of God's grace to put us in position to be the recipient of his grace, and allow him to do the inner work of transforming us to be righteous. And so similarly, I would say like my decisions to say yes to relationships, and any other foster kid who would make the decision to say yes to people who say, hey, we want to be a part of your life, the decision is not all that grandiose. All it does is it is the means, it's the vehicle that ushers them into the position that allows them to be the recipient of ultimately what's healing and what's fully transformative for them. So,
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's
Yeah.
good. Okay. Yeah. Go on. Sorry, Travis, go ahead.
Oh no, if you had a good thought, jump in on it.
Well, I don't know that it's a good thought. It was
Well,
just,
it is a
I
thought.
was just,
We'll find out. So now
no,
just
no,
say
no,
it, and we
no,
can
no.
and we'll judge it. And
Now I lost the thought.
yeah, now the listeners are in anxious anticipation.
What is this?
But Michael, yeah, that was really well stated. He does say that, and that's what a lot of people they confuse feeling like they have to earn God's love, earn God's grace, and it's and again, it's not about earning it. It's not about doing nothing because effort isn't opposed to earning. So you do put effort in. Way I like to describe it is life with God is not a rowboat where you're doing all the work, and it's also not a cruise ship where you're just lying back, but it's a sailboat where the wind blows, but you must hoist your sail. So,
That's really good.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and yeah, like another stop off point of great things you said, especially, kind of as you help rouse the faith community to step into this issue. And that's part of what this podcast is about, is to show that this is a backyard issue. We talked about before, foster care is a very unique space where, like, you as part of the solution means, if you're a foster parent, bringing this cause into your very home. And if you're a mentor, it's right with you as well. It's all around us. These kids need our help. There's a great line by the writer Terry Pratchett when he said, "Some shadows are so long they arrive before the light." And I think that is a devastating look at foster care, of like this looming big shadow. But I love that your story is one that talks about your faith, how God intervened in your life. The light starts to recede the shadows. And I think that it's just an inspiring thing for us all. So as you kind of land the plane here, how would you finish the sentence, Michael? What kids in foster care really need is?
Yeah, for me, it's unequivocally relationships.
Mm-hmm.
I think relationships are the vessel that God, again, not just in the lives of foster care, but especially because of that's our topic today. Relationships are the vessels that God uses to catalyze and promote inner transformation, healing, restoration of the things that have been broken and lost. In the book of Joel, God tells the Israelites, "I will restore to you everything the locusts have consumed."
Mm-hmm.
And I think he does it through relationships. I think God restores us, he rebuilds us, um, like chiefly through relationships. And that's not to say that he doesn't intervene at all and do his thing, and that we don't have any ability to connect with him directly. But what my experience has been is that there's just been a multitude, an endless multitude of relationships that have promoted the healing that has taken place thus far. And I would say every kid needs it. Like, many people have told me that, like, I'm lucky to be in the position that I am, as far as having gone through what I've went through and being as emotionally or mentally healthy, if you want to call it that. Um, and if that's the case, and if I needed the immense number of relationships that have brought me to where I am today, then how much more so? How many more relationships does somebody who might not be as mentally or emotionally healthy, how much do they need? And so I do think that there's the old adage that it takes a village. Like, I think everyone needs their village. And so I would say, only because I know that I haven't been easy to be in relationship with for other people, that have graciously loved me, that it just takes some commitment, and it takes some selflessness, or a lot of selflessness. And what I have believed as long as I've been in youth ministry, which I think really applies here, is that sometimes this seems like a very fruitless ministry. That engaging with kids who need to look more like Jesus, engaging with kids who have hard backgrounds, it is rare sometimes that you will see fruit. And there will be seasons where you wonder if anything is working. Um, I don't know that that's a reason in and of itself to not do it to begin with. And so Galatians says, "Don't grow weary in doing good." And so we know that this is good. And so I think we should do it.
That's good. Well, Michael, you've been an amazing interviewee and an incredible ambassador in this space. I'm wondering, is there an easy way for our listeners, if they're wanting to learn more about you, follow you? Do you have any speaking events, social media website? What would be an easy, good ways for people to connect?
Yeah, so last April, I hopped off all social media, and I've not made any decision as to when that will resume. I have no thought that I'll be back on anytime in the near future.
You're not on
Um,
eHarmony or anything? Like, I
Yeah.
just,
no, yeah, connect with me on that. No,
right?
not you, Brian,
Connect
not
on
you.
that.
No, no. So I got off all social media, and I am available to speak, and I am interested. I do feel some responsibility to, when asked, to share my story
Mm-hmm.
because I don't ultimately believe it's mine. I would say the best way to get a hold of me is just probably through my email,
Okay.
which is M for Michael, A for Anthony, Weitzman, WEITZMAN at iCloud.com. That's really the only way that somebody could find me right now. And for now, like I feel really good about that, and
Good.
just kind of sitting in that space for a bit.
Yeah, that's
That's
great.
great.
Yeah, as far as another good mental health decision you've made.
Right. Detox from social media.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Well, Michael, so grateful for you and for you sharing your story and for really showing people that there is a lot of hope that people can have, even when they've faced kind of challenges that you've had and trauma, that uh, there is still light in
Mm,
life. Mm-hmm.
yeah. Yeah.
Thank
Thank you
you.
guys. I appreciate
Yeah,
y'all inviting me to be a part of this.
of course.
Thanks for
All
being
right.
with us.
God bless you, Michael.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, will you help us reach more people by subscribing, sharing the podcast with a friend, and leaving a 5-star review? If you've been inspired by what you've heard today and want to learn more of how you can make a difference for kids in foster care and the foster families where you live, visit americaskidsbelong.org. We depend on individual donors to fund our work. We'd be grateful if you would consider joining us as a monthly donor. Visit americaskidsbelong.org to make your tax-deductible donation. Thank you. Together, we can ensure a family for every child in foster care and a foster-friendly community to ensure every foster family feels loved and supported.